There is a really massive issue in the Roblox community that I have never seen any other commentary YouTube discuss, and that is the predatory nature of Discord dress up servers. And I know some of you guys are going to freak out, but in today's video, we're going to be using Dress to Impress's Discord server as like an example of what not to do. And I do want to clarify that since like a lot of the allegations and stuff arose, they did actually take the time to revamp some of their server. So I do want to clarify that some of these things have been resolved, and if they haven't resolved, I will clarify that. But the fact that this was even there in the first place to me is incredibly concerning and really does pose a really big risk to minors that are on these servers. So, if you guys don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, a couple months ago, which I also had to preface this isn't meant to be like a hateful video. This is meant to bring awareness to an issue. And, again, accountability is different than hatred. And they have taken accountability for the most part and changed some things, but it is important to highlight this because there's still so many dress up servers that kind of just copied what Dress to Impress is doing with theirs and haven't applied these changes. And I just think it's really important to highlight this. So anyways, for those of you that don't know, a couple months ago in line with when the Bplays allegations dropped, which at the time she was the community manager for Dress to Impress, her abilities as a Dress to Impress community manager were revoked. And in rise of that, there was some allegations that came out regarding Dress to Impress and the staff not being treated well, regarding certain staff being predatory towards other staff, adults on the staff team being inappropriate, stuff like that. And I'm not going to get fully into that because honestly, I don't necessarily feel like it's my place. There was a lot to that situation, and that's why I didn't really make a video about it when it came out because I honestly just didn't know where to start. It was a lot of stuff to cover, and it made me feel really overwhelmed. And obviously, I want to do justice to anything I talk about, so I just kind of want to stay in my realm of knowledge and not necessarily make a video if I don't think I can present things accurately. But basically, what ended up happening was a bunch of mods quit and they made statements were like, hey, I wasn't treated very well. And this doesn't necessarily mean they weren't treated very well by Dress to Impress itself, but rather people involved in the moderation and higher up team in the game. And they kind of just talked about how they've been treated poorly, that there was one person, I guess they were sick at some point in the hospital and they still had to moderate or something like that. And there are concerns with people not being compensated, which I understand this is going to be kind of controversial, but I really don't think it should be. But there is a massive issue with people who work on these games not being properly compensated. And I understand when you own a large game, obviously people want to work for you, they want to be involved, but that kind of creates this predatory kind of nature where kids and adults are being kind of exploited for their labor. And I know this isn't inherently illegal, but morally and ethically, it just seems wrong to expect people to moderate a massive server and not compensate them. And kind of like, I feel like the mentality behind this is, oh, well, if they want to be compensated, we'll just get somebody else to do it because there's like hundreds of kids lined up ready to do this job. And if someone is going to make a big fit about being paid for their time and labor, then they'll just probably fire them and hire somebody else, which I'm not saying this is Dress to Impress, but that's a lot of dress up servers where they will be like, hey guys, we're hiring moderators. And you would assume hiring implies paid position. But once you get into the job, they don't actually pay you at all. You don't get compensated for your time and you don't get compensated for your work, which although it's not inherently illegal because it technically isn't like a real job, I know it sounds bad. I did all sorts of research and it varies by country, but because you're not like a contracted employee most of the time, it's considered like a volunteer position, even though in my opinion, it's labor and you are working. Regardless, a lot of these devs or these servers do not pay the people that moderate for them, and that to me is a moral and ethical issue. But as it relates to predatory nature of these servers, the financial one is one of them, where you are recruiting people and having people, including children, working and dealing with the hate and harassment that a game garners. If you guys have seen anything about Monsterverse, I think maybe some of us have seen like the firsthand impacts of how aggressive the community is. And a lot of the times bigger games have the power to hide that, but smaller games don't always have the resources to file takedown requests or to, get negativity out of their channels with a ton of moderation, stuff like that, right? And so what a lot of us don't realize is how much hate and negativity games get. And what I think is really concerning to me is that some servers, not talking about Dress to Impress, because they have changed this since, a couple months ago. It took them 45 days though, but regardless, they did make it so their mod team is only 18 plus going forward. However, previously they had children dealing with the moderation notes of people being, abusive verbally, people harassing them, people being really toxic, and people just being really, really nasty. And I honestly think that is just such a terrible thing to have kids do, and I appreciate that they've changed that, but the fact that that was even a case in the first place is so alarming to me because it's one thing to have like an adult deal with stuff like that, But to have a kid where their frontal lobe is not fully developed, they're highly impressionable, and also just the stress that would induce on a child. And I'm not trying to sit here and be like, oh my god, a kid's incompetent, because that's not the point of what I'm saying. The point of what I'm saying is that a kid does not necessarily have the coping skills of an adult and doesn't have the ability to remove them from situations like an adult does. And to put a child in a situation where they are put in danger through verbal abuse or threats or harassment from server members, I just think is so problematic. Now, aside from that, I did want to talk about, just like the parasocial relations between children and adults in these servers. And I do want to clarify, because I did use like Dress to Impress as a case study for this. They, when like the whole Bplays allegations came out, they made a statement, the owner made a statement, which I'll put on the screen. And they said, guys, like, obviously we need to revamp this. We're sorry. We're going to, take these people off the team, blah, 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 blah. And that's what they said. And they stated that on August 25th of this year. And they're like, yeah, we're going to fix this. Sorry, guys. And that was what went out. And it wasn't until 45 days later, it was October 9th, that they actually released a statement about what they've changed, which I appreciate that they took the time to, talk with people that are in the industry about how to make the server safer. However, I feel like 45 days to turn around a change that is so desperately needed, in my opinion, if you can roll out updates during that time, I think you can deal with the Discord server, but maybe I'm just being picky. But part of their thing was that they stated that they have a mission to only hire 18 plus. And that's where I'm a little bit like, oh, mission. Mission isn't, a promise. It's our goal. Our goal is to only hire 18 plus. And I went to the worker or whatever team member introduction channel, and a lot of them have their age in their, bio thing, because they all did introductions, and they have their age there except for one person. Maybe that was just a personal choice. And to be fair, people can lie about their ages. And so honestly, I'm just sitting here kind of like, how do you confirm these people are actually adults? Because I feel like asking for somebody's ID is kind of like a breach of privacy, but at the same time, not confirming if they're an adult is also like a concern, because you'll have kids saying they're 18 when they're like 12. So I don't know, because I know for a fact when I like signed up for a Movie Star Planet account, I told them I was like 37 years old and I was like 9. So I think a lot of us don't use our real ages. On Roblox thinks I'm 60. On my childhood account. So I definitely do think there still is some issues with this, especially the wording of, we'll make it a mission to only hire 18 plus. Why not make it like a requirement or a promise? Like, children should not be working for large games, one, unpaid, and two, put in a position where they are directly, at risk from people. And that's where I'm getting into with the second thing. Kids, and although it can apply to adults too, kids primarily are incredibly impressionable, and kids themselves are more likely to fall into parasocial relationships, which, if you don't know what that is, it's when you develop this one-sided relationship with somebody who typically is seen as like higher up in society than you. So that can be, a YouTuber, it can be a game development team, it could be a movie star. Example, a lot of people's relationships with Taylor Swift are parasocial, because they'll be like, oh my god, my queen, Taylor Swift, and they'll be like posting about her constantly, and Taylor Swift has no idea who you are. And I'm not saying that that's inherently bad, but it just highlights how common and normalized parasocial relationships are between youth and people who are in a position of authority. And unfortunately, when games, which Dress to Impress has since changed that, so I do want to highlight that, but with some other dress up game servers, what they do is they put out moderation applications to everybody, and they just have the requirement you have to be 13 plus, which 13 plus is the generic age requirement for Discord, so there shouldn't be people below 13 in your server anyways. But they put out moderation applications for people, and basically kids will flock to these moderation applications because they want so badly to be included in a popular game. And unfortunately, that stems from a perspective where they have a parasocial relationship with the game itself and the developers for that game. And what's really concerning about this is that a lot of the time, kids are willing to not be compensated for their time, to be mistreated, and to be, surrounded by adults, which in my opinion is very, very problematic. At the end of the day, kids want to have a position of authority. They want to be recognized by their favorite game. They want to feel like they're appreciated. And so they'll do that by offering their services for free. And even if a kid is offering their time for free to moderate for your server, I am a firm believer that everybody should be compensated for their time. Example, my YouTube thumbnail artists, they don't live in North America. They live in another country, and they're they don't have minimum wage. It's not like a thing there. And they quoted me like $2 for a thumbnail. And I was like, yeah, no, absolutely not. And I paid them $20 every thumbnail. Not to say that's a massive amount to pay for a thumbnail. It really isn't. It's actually very reasonable. But I wasn't going to take advantage of somebody's financial situation to pay them less than what I feel like they deserve to be paid. Like, I think it's just like a very bizarre thing to, in my opinion, almost exploit children for their free labor and their desperation to be attached to your game and not pay them for their work. Like, at the end of the day, regardless of the kind of work it is still labor intensive to be dealing with moderation tickets and dealing with people who are in the community. And I know firsthand, I'm sure a lot of you guys do too, any community on Roblox can be incredibly aggressive and incredibly nasty. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids will be dealing with tickets where grown adults are being like aggressive and nasty. And sure, you could say, oh, well, they'll get banned if they're nasty to moderators. Okay, yeah. But they have to do something first for them to be banned. And that doing first thing can be them setting a ticket that is really hateful, really nasty, and threatening. And I just think psychologically and just morally, it is so incorrect to have children put in a position where they are directly, at the chance of being victimized by people who are going to be really aggressive in the ticket system, or people who are going to be really mean, because at the end of the day, they don't necessarily have the skills and the resources that an adult has to separate themselves from that and to develop healthy boundaries in the internet. And unfortunately, when kids are young and still learning, they're going to develop the idea in their head that this is an accessible way to talk to somebody. And kids are, in my opinion, less likely to advocate for themselves. As example, when I was a kid and being mistreated, or bullied by people, I wouldn't say anything. And now I have a commentary channel and I'm very quick to point out things that I don't think are right because, I'm older now and I have a broader understanding of what is and is not acceptable. And unfortunately, when you hire young children to work for your Discord server or work for your game, they unfortunately don't necessarily have, the skills to separate themselves from content like that. And even just the other day, I had somebody reach out to me that was a representative for a game. It was so obvious they were a child. It was so obvious. And just like the way they were talking with me was just like, I can be honest, it was so condescending. I'm like, babe, you need to calm down because what you're saying, yeah, no, no. And unfortunately, just because sometimes they just don't understand. And I think it's really problematic to hire children. And there's a whole other video I'm going to make about Roblox child labor because that's like a whole other thing. But it is so problematic to do that and to basically exploit a child's desperation for your attention and approval into basically benefiting you and for free or highly discounted labor. The other thing too is that these kind of servers, specifically dress-up servers, and although this can happen with any server, specifically dress-up servers attract an audience of younger females. And I understand guys and girls, everybody, non-binary people, anybody can enjoy a dress-up server. But the truth is, if you look at the stats, a lot of these dress-up servers will have a higher quantity of younger females. And that's just because that's like the demographic it caters to. Not saying other people can't enjoy it. Everybody can enjoy these games. However, that's the demographic that they are most likely, resonating with. And what's incredibly concerning to me is that child recognize that. And they recognize that games like Dress to Impress or games like Royale High or, other games on Roblox, right? Games where they are very girly and dress up. And chances are you're probably not going to find like a 40-year-old woman playing those games. Of course, there will be 40-year-old people who play them, but the majority of people playing those games, I would assume, are between ages of 6 and 17. Of course, there's adults that play any game, and I don't think that's inherently bad or anything like that, but I think it highlights an issue with not speaking directly to Dress to Impress, but where these dress-up servers acknowledge and they know that a large portion of their demographics are children, and most importantly, they're young girls. And young girls, although boys can also be victimized, are typically the main target of internet predators. And the thing, I'm not trying to say that young boys or non-binary individuals can't be targeted, because that certainly happens and it happens every single day, and it's honestly really unfortunate. However, at least from the statistics I viewed when I was doing research for this video, it seems like younger girls are typically more at risk for being grouped, primarily because of just the social pressures of being perceived as beautiful and stuff like that not necessarily other groups have. Not to say they can't be victimized, but again, that's just from the stats that I saw. And what's really concerning to me is that predators recognize this, and they will go to servers, example, like the Dress to Impress server, and they will apply for roles being moderators, or they will try to get high up in the community. And I'm not saying that Dress to Impress is complicit in this. However, there was an instance with Dress to Impress where a moderator accused somebody else who was an adult of being inappropriate. And there was all this allegations of inappropriate behavior and adults being inappropriate and stuff like that. And my concern is that, unfortunately, games like Dress to Impress do attract predators because they are, painted as a girly game for young girls, and it's a very girly community. And again, not to say other people can't enjoy that game, but predators is that there will be a lot more young girls in that server than, example, a Call of Duty server, right? And so they're going to join these servers with the intention of seeking out victims, of seeking out people who are talking the general chats, maybe people who are talking about how sad they are, people who talk about how lonely they are, and they'll be like, oh, let's play Roblox together. And then soon enough, it becomes DMing privately, and then it becomes full-on grouping. And I want to clarify that Dress to Impress or any other dress-up server, they're not, accountable for if, somebody meets somebody in the server and then they go out of the server and have a conversation and then they get grouped. That's not their responsibility. However, what is their responsibility is to properly screen people who are in the moderation team of their server. And unfortunately, when you have a mod team and you're opening it up to adults, which is what they're doing now, and what they previously did, it's going to attract some some adults who have bad intentions, adults that want control over minors, adults that want to abuse their power in a server to get the upper hand over children. And, my concern, which I don't know if they've changed this, they did not address this in their update, is that I don't know if they're paying people. Yes, maybe they're hiring only 18 plus people, or they have a quote mission of hiring only 18 plus people going forward. But my concern is if these people are still not being compensated, not to say they're not professional, but the way you attract the most professional moderators is through compensation, because people who take a job very seriously, not to say people who aren't paid can't take a job seriously, but people who are more likely, who do this professionally, who do this as a full-time job, are more likely to take it more seriously. And I think that kind of, effort, especially from some of the current moderators, deserves to be compensated. And it's not like Dressed Impress doesn't have the money to do that, right? They are a very large game. They have a toy line. They do collabs with Wicked. They have money. And I'm not sure, there was allegations when the documents came out that people weren't paid for their moderation work. I don't know if that's still the case or that was ever the case, but I do know that is a commonplace, thing in a lot of these servers for moderators to not be compensated. And I feel like when you're going through tickets and you're expected to act professionally, you should be compensated for your time. But the flip side of that is that when you are hiring people for the moderation role, you need to be doing proper background checks, because how was it that a community manager that had allegations of speaking to minors and having inappropriate relations with the minors was hired in the first place? And unfortunately, I think it was just because of her role in the community and her influence that she was hired as some sort of free walking advertisement, because B Plays already had a massive follower base for just making content. And in my mind, and in my opinion, they kind of just exploited that for their own gain. They're like, oh, well, she can be a walk-in advertisement, so might as well have her as the community manager, when B Plays, in my opinion, had no valid experience to be a community manager. And she was a community manager for Royale High, but there was a bunch of issues with that, and it wasn't always handled right. And I don't know why, seeing the track record, you'd be like, yeah, ding ding, perfect candidate for this role. It just doesn't make sense to me. And unfortunately, when you have a server and you're not necessarily compensating people, which then, in my opinion, leads to you not necessarily hiring the most professional people, because obviously professionals want to be paid for their time, you are then attracting people that have the potential to be problematic or dangerous individuals. And I'm not sitting here saying any of their current mods are, dangerous like that, because I don't think that. They all seem really professional, at least from what I've seen. I don't think there's any issues currently. But in past situations with Dressed Impress and other Discord servers for other games, not just Dressed Impress, they are actively hiring adults, and I think a lot of people fail to realize, why would a 30-year-old man want to moderate for Dressed Impress? Sure, maybe they just enjoy the game, and I'm sure that is the case for some of these other servers, but you have to really look into, okay, this person is a grown adult, they probably have bills to pay, they most likely have a career. What typically incentivizes someone who is 30 years old to spend hours upon hours of their day moderating a children's server? And I know you could say, oh, out of the kindness of their heart. And I'm sure there is people that are out of the kindness of their heart. And there's always going to be situations where there's a one-off or someone who they don't think that way. And I agree. I'm not trying to group every single adult as being problematic, because that's not what I'm trying to say. However, what incentivizes a grown man, not talking about Dressed Impress, but in other servers, a grown man who probably has a full-time day job, who maybe has a wife and kids, to be sitting on their crusty laptop every night, moderating a server full of little girls? Am I the only one that's thinking this is absolutely absurd? And it really just makes me so concerned. And I'm not talking directly about Dressed Impress here, but just in general. The kind of narrative that Roblox servers have, where they will just open up moderation applications to anybody, and because people aren't compensated, they unfortunately typically will attract a group of people that aren't necessarily super professional. And unfortunately, from what I've seen in other servers, there's going to be people that they attract that are very problematic. People that solely want to abuse their power, people who have terrible alternative, motivations for having this job. And it to me, it's very concerning. If I was a parent, I would not allow my child on any of these Discord servers for any of these dress up games or any Roblox Discord servers anyways. And maybe I'm just being super woke here and super, I don't know, overprotective, but from my own experiences as a kid on Discord, this is the kind of stuff that actively victimized me and led me to having to go to years of therapy. And it just, I guess, really strikes a chord with me, because nobody talks about this and nobody talks about how problematic it is. And there's so many layers to it. You're, in my opinion, actively exploiting child labor, which some people be like, oh, monitoring a Discord server isn't child labor. My opinion is any sort of thing where you are required to spend time and follow certain rules and act a certain way. In my opinion, that's a job. And you should be compensated for that. And although, Dressed Impress says that they are on a mission of not hiring children going forward, I think it should have never happened, and other Roblox servers should not be doing that either. You should not be hiring children to do a job that is intended for adults. Children should not be put in a situation where they can be actively victimized by the abuse of toxic server members. That is not right. That is incorrect. And it puts children in danger, and I really disagree with it. And the other thing too is if these servers really want the best thing for their community and they want to have professional moderators, I think that's great. And that's why you need to pay people. And again, I can't speak to Dressed to Impress's moderation system now because they said they put in these changes, and I have put the screenshots, I'm sure, in the video of what they said, but they didn't directly speak to any sort of monetization or any sort of payment towards these people who are spending hours of their day moderating. And that to me is concerning because there are people, which I know it sounds silly, but there are people who their full-time job is to moderate Discord servers. And a lot of famous YouTubers actually pay people a salary with benefits. And I'm not saying that Dressed to Impress has to do the benefit thing, but there are some bigger YouTuber servers where they pay Discord moderators, which is so silly to say, but they pay them like a wage. Like they get a yearly salary and they get benefits and they get to pay time off and stuff like that. And although I understand maybe Dressed to Impress doesn't have the financial means to do all that, but at the end of the day, if you're a game of this magnitude, I feel like you have the ability to pay people for their time, and I really think that's something that should be done in order to attract the right kind of audience, which in my opinion should be people that genuinely care about your community and people that really want to help. And I also think it's unfair to any current moderators if they aren't being compensated for their time. Sure, people are like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter, like I'm fine with that, but morally, it just feels off to me to not pay people for their time. And again, I'm not sure what their compensation plan is currently. They did not touch on that, but from statements that were made from people when this whole drama started, they were saying that they were never paid. I don't know if that's the case, but regardless, I am a firm believer that everybody should be compensated for their time. And, especially when you're a game that is actually profiting off of people, moderating your server, I think it's important to pay them. And, for my server, there's a lot of people that will send me a message like, Pommy, I don't have your full Discord server. No, babe, you do. And I've gotten so many messages of people being like, you need to add channels, you need to add chats. And the reason I'm not doing that is, number one, I think it opens up avenues for children to be victimized. And I know that there are going to be kids in my Discord server. I don't want to do that. Second of all, I don't have the time, and neither does my fiance, to be managing the chats. So absolutely not. And third of all, you could say, oh, just hire a moderator. Personally, with the money that I'm making off my channel, it's not pocket change. Like, it's decent money. But I don't have the financial means to be hiring somebody and paying them $30,000 a year to moderate my Discord server that makes me zero money. It just doesn't make sense, and I wouldn't want to open up chat channels without the proper protections for my audience. I think it's very dangerous, and I would never do that. And so that's personally why I don't have any chat channels, and I feel like if you don't have the financial means to hire proper moderators and to compensate people for their time, as you morally, in my opinion, should be doing, you should not have chat channels. I don't know, maybe I'm super woke for saying this, I don't know, but it really, really concerns me when popular games, not just talking about Dressed to Impress, but other games too, when they have Discord servers where they are hiring children, completely disregarding the fact that children are highly impressionable and can be more easily victimized and manipulated than a grown adult, and then hiring grown adults and not doing proper background checks and not paying them. I still think, and of course, at the end of the day, maybe the Bplays situation, or the allegations at least, which they're still allegations, weren't super public before, but it's not like a lot of the documents and stuff were new. These screenshots, upon my research, have been circulating for years, especially on the Bplays Snark Reddit, on, other forums of the internet, Discord servers. There were documents that have been made years prior, and I understand obviously games are attracted to having somebody represent their game who already has a built-in fan base, because that works as active free advertisement for the game and it gives them reach that they otherwise wouldn't have. However, how Bplays allegations, which again, they're still allegations, how they bypass so many levels of moderation and how it went so far as to her being the main face and community manager for this game when she has, in my opinion, no formal education doing so, and these incredibly serious allegations against her for the way that she's conducted herself with minors, that is so concerning to me. And they said they're going to be hiring a new server manager or a new community manager. I haven't seen anything about that. If I do find that, I'll put a note on the screen. But I generally just think it is so concerning that large games don't do proper background checks, don't compensate people for working on the moderation team, and hire minors. What are we doing? In no other world would it be acceptable to hire a child to do a job and not pay them. And again, some people don't see Discord moderating as a job, but I feel like if you're spending hours and hours and hours every single night doing stuff for somebody else where you have to follow certain rules, you have to behave a certain way, where someone alleged that they were in the hospital and couldn't take time off because they had to be moderating, babe, if I'm not getting paid, I'm not doing jack shit. I don't care if you want me to moderate. I'm in the hospital. Go yourself. You know what I mean? What? But anyways, obviously, that's just my opinion. I do want to clarify that, and thankfully, Dressed to Impress has made some changes. I will highlight 45 days after they said they would, which I appreciate that they took the time, obviously, to do some research, but I do still think there's stuff that has to be addressed with that, and unfortunately, it did set a precedent to other servers that it's okay to hire children for work, which I highly disagree with. I think it's morally incorrect. At the end of the day, it's not inherently illegal, but I just personally have an issue with it, and I'm sure all the other people do too. And this video isn't intended to spark hate or harassment towards Dress to Impress because they have implemented changes and I appreciate that, but it's to discuss a larger issue in the dress up community where other servers have mimicked similar practices and haven't made the changes. And so I want to just clarify that personally, I think it is a huge conflict of interest to hire children to moderate your server. And if you aren't willing to moderate your server as well, I don't think you should be hiring anybody and not paying them. I just think in my opinion, it's just morally and ethically wrong. And at the same time, I have to clarify that moral and ethically wrong is different than illegal. They're not the same. But personally, just with my belief system and how I believe people should be treated, I don't think that's right. And I really do hope that with these changes, they've implemented a payment schedule for the people who work on the game and the people that spend their time off of work and their time off their real life job and then time away from family. Sorry, I slurred that. And their time away from their family to be compensated, because I feel like that's a fair thing to do, especially when you're actively profiting off of them working for the game. But regardless, I do want to clarify again, this is not a hate video towards Dress to Impress, but rather pointing out some issues that I've seen, and I am really happy to see that they've actually taken action and have, revamped some things. I think it's really important that, adults are hired for adult jobs and children are not expected to do adult jobs, especially unpaid. But again, just keep in mind, this is my opinion. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on this. If any of you guys have ever moderated for a big server, feel free to let me know your experiences actually, because I'm very curious. I'm trying to think. Probably like way back when. I think I moderated for like an Animal Jam Discord server like way back when. I remember like constantly being harassed by people because someone wouldn't accept their trade and just like getting constant DMs, and I was stupid and didn't know how to turn off my DMs. But I would really be interested to hear about what you guys think about this, maybe your personal experiences, and if you think it's problematic, because I understand obviously not everyone's going to agree with me, but I hope we can all come to a mutual understanding that people deserve to be paid for their time, regardless of their age. And in my opinion, children should not be expected to do jobs meant for adults, but that's just my opinion. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!